It had been a long and brutal war for the alliance of advanced species. The stars themselves seemed to have conspired against them, and with each passing day, it became clearer. Victory was impossible. The human race had long been underestimated, considered little more than a primitive species struggling to survive on a pale blue. But now, as the last of the Alliance's fleets drifted through the void, a new and terrifying truth emerged. Across the galaxy, the war was lost. The Zephorii, an ancient race of energy manipulators, had shattered humanity's defenses in their first wave of attacks. The Kvant's brutal, insectoid conquerors followed, carving out vast territories in mere months. The Drakons, a fire-breathing species that thrived in high temperatures, had left a trail of destruction in their wake. All around them, the voices of once proud species fell silent. The stars were dimming, not with age, but with extinction. And yet, the humans, who had fought so fiercely, so recklessly, had done something no one expected. They survived. In the desolate remnants of what was once the capital of the Alliance, a quiet, oppressive gloom blanketed the planet. The last council of species gathered, their faces drawn and pale with the weight of their failure. The mighty Xanthari, a race of energy beings, looked out over the ruins of the city, their translucent skin shimmering faintly as they flickered in and out of perception. "There's nothing more we can do," the Xanthari leader, Chen, intoned softly. "We have given everything. The humans may yet fight, but they cannot stop what is coming. Our species will be extinct in a matter of weeks, perhaps days." Across the table, the Kvant commander, Torgath, clicked his mandibles in frustration. "The humans are resourceful," he said through a translator, "but they cannot stand against our fleet. The war machines of the Drakons alone could wipe them from existence." "Perhaps," Chen replied, "but the humans have a way of turning the tide when it seems all is lost. We must prepare for what's coming next." Far above the surface of the ruined planet, in the empty void of space, the remnants of the human fleet floated like a distant memory. Shattered ships limped from one dead world to the next, bringing with them only the stories of a fight that could never be won. For the Alliance, the countdown was now public knowledge. The human race was the last species to fall. It was only a matter of time before the final blow came. But even as despair set in among the alien leaders, far from the Council's reach, in the darkness of space, a strange event began to unfold. On the edge of the human solar system, a series of blips appeared on sensor grids, unnoticed at first by the Alliance ships maintaining a vigil over the planet. A single human ship, an older model cruiser, broke the silence of the void, pushing toward the coordinates of the once proud capital. Its appearance was unremarkable, old-fashioned even, and at first the Alliance dismissed it as little more than a relic, perhaps a signal from the remaining human resistance. Then, one by one, ships began to appear. Dozens. Hundreds. A fleet unlike anything the Alliance had ever encountered. They weren't just any ships, but war machines, gleaming, massive, and bristling with weapons. Each vessel radiated an aura of immense power. These weren't the remnants of human forces. They were new, unseen. "We've been blind," Chen whispered as his eyes flickered with recognition. "The humans they've been preparing." Before the Alliance could make sense of the sudden turn of events, a communication signal blared to life across all frequencies, drowning out their thoughts. "This is General Sarah Hawksworth of the Terran Federation. To the surviving leaders of the Alliance of Advanced Species, I suggest you prepare for what's coming. We are no longer the prey." The message ended abruptly, and an eerie silence descended. At that moment, all eyes were turned toward the shimmering fleet advancing at impossible speeds. No one knew where they had come from, or how they had built such powerful ships in the dead of night. But there was no mistaking the truth now. Humanity, the species everyone thought would crumble, had not only survived. They were about to turn the tide of the entire war. As the Alliance commanders looked on, stunned, the first of the human war machines broke the atmosphere, roaring down toward the planet's surface. The final countdown had begun, but this time it was on their terms. The massive human war machines descended with a chilling precision that made even the hardened Alliance commanders pause. Their hulls gleamed like the surface of polished steel, their weapons bristling with advanced technology that sent a shiver down the spines of those who witnessed it. No one had anticipated such a force, least of all the leaders of the Alliance. Chen, the Xanthari leader, struggled to maintain his composure. His shimmering form flickered in and out of focus as his energy levels fluctuated. He had never felt this before, a creeping sense of fear. Not for his life, but for the very existence of his species. They're not just surviving, Torgath hissed through his translator, his mandibles clicking nervously. They've come for vengeance. The communication channel suddenly flared again, and this time a new voice came through, deeper, more commanding than General Hawksworth's. This is Admiral Elias Kane of the Terran Fleet. We are in your system, and we come with a single purpose. You've conquered countless worlds, but it ends here. The Admiral's voice carried a cold finality, and it wasn't just the words that struck fear into the hearts of the Alliance leaders. It was the tone, the sheer authority behind it. The humans weren't begging for mercy or offering peace. They were demanding it. Below, on the surface of the devastated planet, chaos erupted. The first of the war machines landed with a thunderous roar, shaking the ground beneath them. Each vessel was a marvel of human ingenuity. Towering mechanical giants capable of leveling entire cities, their engines humming with an energy that made the air crackle with static. The Alliance had underestimated not only humanity's survival instincts, but their ability to innovate, to adapt in the face of overwhelming odds. Within moments, the human machines began to deploy troops, soldiers in advanced exoskeletons that shimmered like silver ghosts in the harsh, smoky atmosphere. They moved with uncanny precision, organizing in tight formations as they began to secure the perimeter of the ruined capital. The remaining forces of the Alliance scrambled. The Kvanth insectoids buzzed anxiously in the air, their wings flapping rapidly as they prepared to intercept. The Zephorii, despite their otherworldly energy manipulation, seemed momentarily paralyzed, their energy readings fluctuating wildly. And even the mighty Drakens hesitated, their once dominant fire-breathing warriors unsure how to combat this new and unpredictable threat. In the midst of the growing turmoil, a sleek human transport vessel, escorted by armed fighters, touched down just outside the capital's central plaza. The hatch opened, revealing General Sarah Hawksworth herself, her eyes steely and determined as she stepped onto the cracked earth. A small contingent of soldiers flanked her, all poised and ready for whatever came next. She raised a hand to silence her team, listening intently. Overhead, the thrum of the war machines echoed in the distance, a constant reminder of the power humanity had brought to bear. For a moment, she simply stared at the remains of the once great city, its towering spires now nothing more than rubble, its streets deserted, the air heavy with defeat. "We've lost enough," General Hawksworth said, her voice low but filled with iron resolve. "We don't fight to save what's left. We fight to make them remember who we are." As she spoke, a massive roar filled the air, a terrifying screech from the sky. The Alliance forces, still reeling from the sudden appearance of the human machines, were too slow to react. A Kvanth assault craft, an enormous insectoid warship, attempted to dive bomb the landing zone, its wings slicing through the air. But before it could strike, a volley of plasma fire erupted from one of the human war machines, hitting the Kvanth ship squarely in its underbelly. The explosion was deafening. Pieces of the craft disintegrated into a cloud of fiery debris, scattering across the battlefield. "This is just the beginning," Admiral Kane's voice boomed over the comms, as the human fleet above began to take position. From the surface to the sky, the human war machines moved as one, an unstoppable force of nature. But the Alliance was far from finished. Despite their fear, they weren't going to roll over and let the humans win. Chen flickered in front of the War Council's hollow projector, an image of deep concentration reflected in his glowing eyes. "They cannot be underestimated. These machines are too advanced, too powerful." His voice buzzed with energy. We must strike fast, before they gain more ground. I will initiate a counteroffensive. But there was a catch. The humans had already anticipated this. A new, terrifying signal flared to life, interrupting their communication lines. The signal was clear, concise, and chilling. "We know you're planning to attack." General Hawksworth's voice came through, cold and unyielding. "Try it. I dare you." The humans had not just arrived to fight, they had come prepared. And they weren't going to stop until every last invader was driven from their world. The tide of war had indeed turned, and the once proud alliance of advanced species now found themselves facing an enemy they had never expected. An enemy who would stop at nothing to win. "You said." The human fleet hung like a silent predator over the ruins of the capital. The massive war machines, now fully deployed, moved with an eerie precision, almost as if they were one unified entity. On the surface, the soldiers coordinated with a kind of discipline and efficiency that made even the hardened leaders of the Alliance uneasy. The humans weren't just fighting for survival anymore, they were fighting to reclaim what was lost, and the Alliance forces quickly realized that they had no idea what that really meant. General Sarah Hawksworth stood atop a ruined tower, gazing out over the battlefield. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the desolation. The fire from the Kvanth ship still smoldered in the distance, a twisted wreckage of scorched metal and broken bodies. Hawksworth's expression was unreadable, but those who served under her knew what it meant. Every victory, every setback, was part of a greater plan. "Report," she ordered, her voice steady and commanding. A subordinate stepped forward, his face grim. "We've secured the eastern perimeter, General. The Alliance has been scattered, but they're reorganizing. The Zephorii are attempting to regroup in the northern sector, while the Drakens are holed up near the southern mountains." Hawksworth nodded, her gaze hardening. "They're not just going to sit back and wait to die. We need to hit them before they can launch any counterattacks." Her plan was simple: press the advantage, destroy their morale, and break their unity. But there was something more to it. The humans had a hidden weapon that not even the Alliance could have predicted. They had something the others could never understand: a relentless will to survive, and a capacity for brutality when necessary. Above her, the human fleet moved like clockwork. A massive warship, far larger than anything the Alliance had ever seen, began to break through the planet's atmosphere, its ion engines leaving a trail of fire in its wake. It was the Vengeance, humanity's flagship, and its sheer size alone was enough to make the Alliance tremble. On its decks, human Marines were already preparing for a ground assault. "I want all units ready for deployment," Hawksworth continued, turning to her team. "Make sure we have air superiority before the Drakens mobilize. I want them to see what's coming before they even have time to react." But as they prepared to execute their plan, a new signal came through, an encrypted message sent directly to the heart of the human command center. "This is Chen of the Xanthari. We demand a ceasefire." Hawksworth's eyes narrowed as she read the message. It was the first time the Alliance had ever made such a direct move, and it reeked of desperation. "The Xanthari," she muttered, leaning closer to the screen. "They want to negotiate? Now." "They know they're losing," a subordinate offered, sensing her frustration. "They want to try and survive by turning us against each other." Hawksworth's lips twisted into a bitter smile. "We don't negotiate with the enemy, but we do know how to end things quickly." She turned to the communications officer. "Send a message back. The time for negotiations has passed. The only thing that will be decided now is who survives and who dies." As the message went out, the Alliance forces on the ground were already regrouping. But they had made a fatal miscalculation, one they wouldn't realize until it was too late. In the distance, a strange vibration echoed across the ruins. It started faintly, but soon the ground itself began to tremble. The human war machines, massive hulks of metal and fire, were moving, each one seemingly powered by an energy source beyond anything the Alliance had ever encountered. The sound of their engines was deafening as they powered forward, tearing up the landscape with an unrelenting force. The first wave of human soldiers, clad in their exoskeletons, deployed at lightning speed. They were armed with advanced railguns and energy blades capable of cutting through even the thickest alien armor. Each unit moved like a well-oiled machine, making rapid progress across the battlefield, their tactics synchronized perfectly. But the Alliance wasn't entirely defenseless. The Zephorii, using their ability to manipulate energy, attempted to create shields of pure force, hoping to deflect the incoming fire. Meanwhile, the Drakons had finally mobilized, sending their fire-breathing warriors into the fray, their scorching flames lighting up the battlefield in a fury of heat and destruction. For a moment, it seemed like the human forces would be overwhelmed by sheer numbers. But then, the humans revealed their secret weapon. Without warning, the ground in the center of the Alliance's forces began to crack open, and from the depths of the planet, something massive began to emerge. A massive war machine, unlike anything the Alliance had seen before, rose from the earth like a titan awakening from slumber. The sheer size of it was staggering. Its body was a mesh of human ingenuity, sharp angles, reinforced plating, and mounted cannons large enough to level entire cities. "This is Titan class," Hawksworth's voice crackled over the comms, "our final trump card." As the human Titan emerged, the battle shifted. The Alliance forces struggled to comprehend the scale of the threat. The Titan moved slowly, but each step was a devastating earthquake. When it fired, entire swathes of the battlefield were reduced to rubble. The Kvants, Zephorii, and Drakons could only retreat in the face of such overwhelming power. Chen, observing from afar, was the first to admit it. This is no longer a battle. It is a massacre. The humans were no longer fighting to defend themselves. They were fighting to annihilate. And now, with their final weapon unleashed, the Alliance's fate was sealed. The human war machine had truly arrived. And it was only just getting started. The ground shook with every step the human Titan took, its colossal form casting a long shadow over the shattered landscape. Each thundering footfall seemed to reverberate deep into the hearts of the Alliance forces, who were still reeling from the sheer scale of the assault. It was no longer a fight for victory. It was a struggle for survival. Across the battlefield, the Kvants had already begun to retreat, their insectoid bodies darting through the air, trying to regroup with their remaining forces. The Drakons, unable to deal with the immense firepower of the Titan, had fallen back into the mountain ranges, their fires sputtering out as they regrouped, licking their wounds. Even the Zephorii, those ancient energy manipulators, seemed to waver as they struggled to maintain their shields against the human onslaught. In the midst of the chaos, General Sarah Hawksworth stood at the heart of the human assault. She had not been on the front lines during the early stages of the war. She had been in the shadows, studying, planning, waiting for the right moment to strike. Now that the moment had arrived, there was no turning back. "General," a voice broke through her thoughts. It was her communications officer, his face tense. "We're getting reports from the Vengeance. The Alliance is attempting to launch a counteroffensive." Hawksworth's eyes narrowed. "What kind of counteroffensive?" Zephorii and Kvant fleets are moving into position. They're massing for a full-scale assault on the Vengeance. They want to take it out before the Titan reaches the southern sector. She stood up straighter, the weight of the situation sinking in. The Titan had given them the upper hand, but if the Alliance managed to take out Vengeance, humanity's advantage would disappear in a flash. They couldn't afford that. Not now. "Signal the fleet," Hawksworth ordered. "Tell them to fall back into defensive position. Protect the Vengeance at all costs. And make sure the Titan continues its advance. We need to finish this, now." The communications officer saluted and relayed the orders. Above them, the human fleet shifted, moving into position. The Vengeance, a massive ship bristling with weapons, began to turn its weapons toward the incoming Alliance fleets. Long-range turrets powered up, their targeting systems locking onto the enemy ships as they prepared to unleash a deadly salvo. On the surface, the human war machines continued their relentless march forward. The Titan's massive cannons unleashed devastating firepower, sweeping away entire lines of Alliance soldiers in bursts of bright, blinding energy. The Kvants, once a proud and ferocious species, scrambled in panic as their insectoid forms were torn apart by the human assault. Even the Drakens, who had once believed themselves to be unstoppable, were now struggling to keep their ground as the Titan slowly pushed its way into the southern sector. But despite their retreat, the alliance wasn't finished yet. In the mountains of the southern region, hidden from human sensors, the Drakens had prepared their final weapon, a massive underground fortress built into the planet's crust. It was a secret, a last-ditch effort to turn the tide of battle. Their best and brightest had worked tirelessly to construct this weapon, and now it was ready. A signal burst through the Alliance channels. The Drakens are launching their counterstrike. The Ethris cannon is charging. It will be ready in 5 minutes. Hawksworth's eyes widened as the news came through. The Ethris cannon was the Drakens' ultimate weapon, an energy weapon capable of destabilizing a planet's core with a single shot. If it fired, it would not only wipe out the Titan, but it could also obliterate the entire human fleet. "They're desperate," Hawksworth muttered under her breath, but there was no room for hesitation. "Move Vengeance into intercept position. All units, prepare to engage." The sky above the battlefield darkened as the human fleet shifted into formation, taking up defensive positions around the Vengeance. The massive warship began to move toward the Draken stronghold, its cannons charging for a counteroffensive. In the distance, the shimmering, deadly glow of the Ethris cannon came into view, its energy building to a terrifying crescendo. It was a race against time. If the Drakens fired first, humanity's forces would be wiped out. But if the humans could reach the Ethris in time, they might still have a chance. On the ground, the Titan plowed forward, smashing through anything in its path. The remaining Drakens that had survived the human onslaught were now pouring everything they had into slowing the Titan's advance, launching a series of energy-based attacks from their underground fortifications. Status report. Hawksworth barked as the war machine continued its march. "We're taking heavy fire, General," one of her officers reported. "But we're close. If we keep pushing, we'll reach the Ethris before they can charge it." Hawksworth's eyes flashed with determination. "We don't have much time. All units, follow the Titan. Keep moving forward. We're ending this today." Above, the human fleet was already opening fire, launching a barrage of plasma missiles at the Draken fortifications. The air crackled with energy as missiles and counterfire collided in a deadly dance, each side trying to assert its dominance. But then, something unexpected happened. The Ethris cannon, charged and glowing with deadly energy, fired first. The ground beneath them trembled as the beam shot toward the sky, its energy lancing out like a bolt of pure annihilation. The human fleet watched in horror as the beam cut through space, heading directly for the Vengeance. It was the end of a line, or so it seemed. Just as the beam neared, a new figure appeared from the depths of space, a new, unexpected player in the conflict. A single human ship, smaller than any of the war machines, appeared at the very edge of the battlefield. With incredible speed and skill, it darted in front of the Vengeance, absorbing the Ethris cannon's blast. The explosion rocked the entire battlefield, but the human ship held firm. It was only then that Hawksworth realized the humans had a final ace up their sleeve. They had sent in the Vanguard, humanity's greatest secret weapon. And it was going to change everything. The sky above the battlefield crackled with energy, and a brilliant flash illuminated the horizon as the Ethris cannon's deadly beam collided with the Vanguard. The impact sent shockwaves through the ground, shattering nearby buildings and sending plumes of dust and debris into the air. For a moment, everything stood still. The universe seemed to hold its breath. The human fleet had braced for the worst, but when the smoke cleared, the Vanguard, a sleek, advanced warship, was still intact. It was battered, its hull scorched, but it had absorbed the Ethris cannon's energy, preventing the blast from reaching the Vengeance and the rest of the human fleet. The ship was humanity's ultimate gamble, and it had just proven its worth. On the ground, General Hawksworth's eyes narrowed as she watched the aftermath unfold. The Titan was still advancing, pushing forward relentlessly, but now, everything had changed. The Drakens had fired their final weapon, only to see it thwarted by a ship they hadn't even known existed. She glanced toward the communication officer, who was staring at the screen in disbelief. "Report," she commanded, her voice steady despite the shock. "The Vanguard, it absorbed the shot, General. It's holding. We've got a chance to finish this." "The Drakens are disoriented. They didn't expect this." Hawksworth nodded. "Now is the time to strike. Tell the Vengeance to make its move. Titan, keep pushing forward." With the Vanguard holding the line, the human fleet was able to press the advantage. The Vengeance, once the target of the Alliance's combined forces, began to shift its weapons toward the Draken fortifications. Massive energy beams and plasma missiles rained down, piercing through the mountain ranges and collapsing the underground bunkers. The Drakens, who had been so confident in their final weapon, were now crumbling under the weight of the human assault. "Commander, we've neutralized their defenses," one of the officers called out from the tactical station. "The Drakens are in full retreat. They're pulling back into the caverns, but their Etherius cannon is down." The victory felt hollow to Hawksworth. She knew that the Drakens had been dealt a crushing blow, but the war was far from over. The Kvants were still fighting. The Zephorii were regrouping, and the Alliance was a cornered animal. They wouldn't go down without a fight. Not yet. But as the Vanguard began to maneuver back into position, Hawksworth saw something that made her heart skip a beat, a message from the heart of the Alliance forces, transmitted directly to her personal comms. It was from Chen. "General Hawksworth, this is Chen of the Xanthari. You have made your point. We no longer have the strength to continue this fight. But we seek something different, an end to the bloodshed." Hawksworth was quiet for a moment. She had anticipated that the Alliance would eventually ask for peace, but the timing was unexpected. The Etherius cannon had failed, and the Drakens were retreating into their last strongholds. Yet Chen's message was sincere. There was no sense of bravado in his words. It was a call for something she had never thought the Alliance would offer: surrender. "Tell him we'll hear him out," she replied, her voice cold but not unkind. "But make no mistake, this is not over until the last of their forces are driven from this planet." As the human fleet secured their victory over the Drakens, the Kvant forces seemed to waver, their once proud assault units now scattering. The remaining Zephorii, too, had started to pull back. They had been devastated by the power of the Titan, and their psychic shields, once thought invulnerable, had begun to crack under the weight of human firepower. Hawksworth's thoughts returned to the message from Chen. The Xanthari had always been known for their wisdom, their peaceful nature, but they had never before shown any signs of surrender. It was a pivotal moment. Their decision could turn the tide for the entire Alliance. If they backed out of the war, it might mean the end of the Alliance's resistance. But there was something Hawksworth knew deep down. The Xanthari had always been the voice of reason. They had always tried to broker peace. And if they were asking for peace now, it wasn't out of fear. It was out of a recognition that their unity had crumbled, that the war was lost. She turned to her command team. "Prepare for the diplomatic talks. We're not letting them regroup, and we're not letting them use this as a way to strike at us from another angle. We fight to survive, but we also need to show them that humanity doesn't only fight with weapons. We fight with resolve." As the message to the Xanthari was transmitted, Hawksworth watched as the Titan began to approach the heart of the Alliance's remaining strongholds. The Vanguard moved in support, its sleek form cutting through the chaos of the battlefield. The remaining pockets of resistance were fading, but there was still the possibility of a brutal last stand. Back on the surface, the Kvant forces continued to scatter. The Zephorii, now leaderless, were disorganized, their once cohesive ranks splintering into small pockets of resistance. The Titan, with its unstoppable momentum, was an iron fist crashing through the remnants of the Alliance's final defenses. And yet, in the midst of the human triumph, a new signal cut through the communications channels. This time, it wasn't from the Alliance, but from an unexpected source. "This is Admiral Rintak of the Zephorii fleet," came the voice, distorted but unmistakable. "We surrender." The words sent a shock through the human command crew. Surrender? After everything they had done? Admiral Rintak's voice continued, filled with resignation. We cannot continue. The Xanthari were right. We fought to survive, but now we know we can no longer win this war. Hawksworth's heart pounded in her chest as she stood there, staring at the communication screen. One by one, the Alliance species were laying down their arms, realizing that their time had come. Humanity had not just survived the impossible, it had won. The message from Admiral Rintak hit like a thunderclap in the midst of the storm. The last remnants of the once proud Alliance were collapsing before humanity's overwhelming might. As General Sarah Hawksworth watched the transmission, the full weight of the moment settled over her. The war, which had started as a desperate fight for survival, was now becoming something else, an undeniable victory. But there was no time to celebrate. The surrender of the Xanthari was a crucial turning point, but it also raised new questions. What now? The Alliance had splintered, but what would the survivors do? Would they return to their former conquests? Would they attempt to rebuild their shattered unity? Would the remaining forces on the battlefield accept the end of the war, or would they try one last, desperate push to reverse their losses? Hawksworth turned away from the communication screen, her mind already moving to the next phase of the operation. Prepare a response, she ordered her communications officer, her tone sharp and authoritative. Tell Admiral Rintak that we accept their surrender, but they must lay down all weapons immediately. If any Alliance forces attempt to regroup, we will treat them as hostile. Do not leave room for negotiation. Her officer hesitated for a moment. Understood, General. But do you think they will comply? There's still the largest force left, and there's still the possibility of a final attack. Hawksworth's eyes hardened as she looked back out at the desolate battlefield. The ground was littered with the remains of the Alliance's once proud armies. The Titan continued its slow, inexorable march, flattening everything in its path, while the vanguard maintained its guard over the remnants of the Alliance fleet. They'll comply, she said, her voice steady. The war is over. They know it, and they know what we're capable of. There's no more room for doubt. Any further resistance will be crushed. Even as the words left her mouth, a chilling realization settled over her. She had just given the order for total victory. There would be no more negotiations, no more tentative alliances. The Alliance was fractured, and now humanity stood at the precipice of shaping the galaxy's future. But the road ahead would not be simple. The Kvants and the remaining Xanthari fleet still posed a potential threat. Their surrender had been more of a symbolic gesture than a definitive end. There were still pockets of resistance in the mountains, and if any of the Alliance factions chose to fight on, it would mean more bloodshed. In the mountains of the southern sector, the Draken remnants were the most dangerous of all. They had withdrawn deep into their underground stronghold, leaving behind a network of tunnels and caverns where their elite warriors had retreated to lick their wounds. The Titan had made quick work of their outer defenses, but there were still unknowns lurking beneath the surface. The last vestiges of the Draken's strength were hidden there, and Hawksworth knew that, no matter what the rest of the Alliance did, the Drakens would not simply bow out of the war. They had fought too long and too hard to be defeated by the likes of humanity. She knew what had to be done. Prepare an assault team, she ordered. We're going underground. It's time to finish this. The mission was set in motion. A group of the finest human soldiers, outfitted in their state-of-the-art exoskeletons and armed with the latest cutting-edge weaponry, would descend into the Draken's last bastion. Hawksworth's command team would join them, ensuring that the operation went smoothly. They had learned many lessons in the last few days, one of which was that the Drakens were not a force that would surrender easily. If they were to be truly defeated, they had to be wiped out completely. As the human team descended into the subterranean labyrinth, tension hung heavy in the air. The tunnels were silent at first, the only sound the hum of the soldiers' advanced equipment. They moved in perfect formation, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, their footsteps muted by the soft dirt underfoot. Every crevice, every corner, every shadow could hide an ambush. Despite the eerie silence, there was an unspoken understanding among the humans. They knew this wasn't just about victory. It was about ensuring that humanity's future was secure. They had come too far, lost too much, to allow any last remnants of the Alliance to turn the tide. The deeper they went, the more hostile the environment became. The tunnels twisted and turned, some wide enough to fit an entire battalion, others so narrow that they had to squeeze through single file. But they pressed on, moving with methodical precision, knowing that each step brought them closer to the heart of the Draken stronghold. Hours passed, but then, just as they neared their destination, a crackling noise filled the air. A blip on the radar. Hawksworth's heart skipped a beat. "Hold," she whispered. "Wait for confirmation." Suddenly, an explosion rocked the tunnel, throwing the soldiers into chaos. The ground trembled violently as debris rained down around them, and a sharp, high-pitched screech echoed through the caverns. The Drakens had set a trap. They were waiting. "Move," Hawksworth yelled, her voice commanding, as the soldiers quickly adapted, drawing their weapons and forming defensive positions. The Drakens were everywhere, emerging from hidden alcoves and charging through the walls in their deadly exoskeletons. They had prepared for this assault, and they weren't going down without a fight. A brutal firefight erupted in the narrow tunnels. The Drakens fought with a ferocity and desperation that only confirmed what Hawksworth already knew. They had nothing left to lose. But humanity had learned from every battle, every hardship. Their tactics were refined, their weapons more advanced, and their resolve unshakable. In the chaos, a figure emerged from the shadows, a Draken general, larger and more fearsome than anything Hawksworth had encountered. The creature bellowed as it charged forward, its massive claws cutting through the air, seeking to tear through human flesh. But Hawksworth was ready. "Deploy the charge," she barked. Now, an explosive charge, one that had been designed for just this kind of situation, detonated at the entrance of the cavern. The walls trembled again, and the general faltered as it was caught in the blast. It staggered, momentarily disoriented, giving the humans just enough time to close in and deliver the final blow. Within minutes, the Draken's resistance was crushed. The remaining pockets of soldiers were wiped out in the fiery chaos of the blast. Hawksworth stood amid the wreckage, her chest heaving as she surveyed the battlefield. The Drakens had fought hard, but it was over now. The last major threat to humanity's survival had been neutralized. The war was won, but in the back of her mind, Hawksworth knew that peace would not come easily. The galaxy was a vast, complicated place, and humanity had proven it was capable of both creation and destruction. What they did next would determine whether the lessons learned from the war would guide them toward prosperity or into darker times ahead. The war was over, or so it seemed. General Sarah Hawksworth stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, looking out at the silent expanse of space. The stars were serene, untouched by the chaos that had unfolded just days earlier. Humanity had secured a hard-fought victory, but the silence was deceptive. Beneath it, the questions loomed larger than ever. The Alliance had fractured. The Drakens were broken, their resistance extinguished. The Zephorii had surrendered. The Kvants had scattered to the far corners of the galaxy. The remnants of the once powerful coalition were in disarray, but that didn't mean peace was guaranteed. The war had shaken the very foundations of the galaxy. And now, humanity had to step into the void left behind. "General," a voice interrupted her thoughts. It was Lieutenant Harrow, one of her most trusted officers. "We've received a new transmission from the Xanthari. They're requesting an audience." Hawksworth turned, her face unreadable. "What do they want?" "They're asking for a council, General. A summit. The surviving factions of the Alliance want to discuss terms. They claim it's for peace, but we can't be sure." Harrow hesitated. They may be trying to regroup, consolidate their strength. The surrender of the Zephorii doesn't mean the rest will follow suit. "Understood," Hawksworth said, her voice steady but filled with a quiet resolve. "Get me the Xanthari on the line. If they want a summit, they'll get it. But they will understand one thing. We are not negotiating our victory. We fought for this peace, and it's not up for grabs." Harrow nodded and immediately began working on the communication channel. A few moments later, the face of Chen, the Xanthari leader, appeared on the screen. His alien visage was calm and serene, his yellow eyes radiating wisdom and caution. "General Hawksworth," Chen's voice was soft, yet unyielding. "I bring word from the surviving leaders of the Alliance. We request that you join us in a council to discuss the future of our galaxy. You have won the war, but there are more questions to answer. We would not want to repeat the mistakes that brought us to this point." The words carried the weight of ages. The Xanthari had always been the peacekeepers, the voice of reason in the midst of galactic chaos. But Hawksworth knew better than to trust too easily. "And what do you expect from humanity, Chen?" she asked, her tone sharp. "We've fought for survival, for our right to exist. If your council intends to discuss anything other than the terms of the Alliance's dissolution, we will not participate. Humanity will stand alone if necessary." Chen's expression didn't change, though Hawksworth could see a flicker of sadness behind his calm exterior. "General, I am not here to negotiate our surrender or dissolution. I simply ask for a discussion. The galaxy is in turmoil, and the actions of the Alliance have shattered trust between the species. There must be a path forward, one that ensures peace, but also one that prevents the mistakes of the past from repeating themselves." Hawksworth paused, considering the implications of his words. She knew that the galaxy had been a powder keg for centuries, held together by fragile alliances and complex treaties. Now that the war was over, humanity was the dominant power in the galaxy, and that came with a responsibility, a heavy one. "I'll attend the summit," she said finally. "But know this, humanity will not be shackled by the mistakes of the past. We will build something new, or we will stand alone." Chen nodded solemnly. "Understood, General. I will prepare the council. We will speak again soon." The summit was arranged for a neutral location, an old space station on the edge of the galaxy, far from the reaches of any faction's influence. The Vengeance traveled there with a small delegation of human leaders and officers, including Hawksworth. As they neared the station, the enormity of the task ahead weighed on her. She had led humanity through the fire of war, but this was different. This was not about destruction, it was about reconstruction, about shaping the future. As the humans arrived at the space station, the other leaders were already present. Chen, the Xanthari Elder, Admiral Rintak of the Zephorii, and several remaining Kvanth commanders. The room was filled with a palpable tension, each species eyeing the others with wariness, fear, and perhaps respect. Hawksworth took her seat at the head of the table, flanked by her officers. There was a sense of unease in the room. Humanity was not there to beg for peace. They were there to dictate the terms. And everyone knew it. Chen stood and cleared his throat, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of diplomacy. "We stand at a crossroads. The war has ended, but the consequences will ripple across the galaxy for generations. We, the leaders of the Alliance, have failed. Our unity fractured, our strength divided. And now the question remains, what comes next?" Hawksworth stood as well, her gaze unwavering as she addressed the room. "What comes next is simple. We rebuild. Humanity has fought for its survival, and now we stand at the forefront of this galaxy's future. We will not return to the old ways, ways that led to war, suffering, and betrayal. We are done with that. We are building something new, a new order." There was a tense silence as her words hung in the air. The Xanthari, once the keepers of balance, looked troubled. Admiral Rintak shifted uncomfortably, while the Kvanth leaders exchanged wary glances. The remaining factions knew they were being outmaneuvered, but none were ready to admit defeat entirely. This summit wasn't just about laying down arms. It was about deciding who would lead the galaxy, who would have a say in its future. Chen cleared his throat. "And what of the survivors? The remaining forces of the Alliance? Will you simply cast them aside?" "No," Hawksworth replied firmly. "We will offer peace, but it will be on our terms. Those who wish to work with humanity and accept our vision for the future will be allowed to join us. Those who wish to fight, to challenge us, will be destroyed." The silence that followed was thick with tension. Hawksworth knew she had pushed the limits. She had offered peace, but made it clear that humanity's supremacy would not be compromised. "We will not beg for peace," she continued. "We will not let our survival be dictated by the failures of others. Humanity has shown its strength, and we will lead, whether you follow us or not." The room shifted uneasily as the others processed her words. This wasn't a typical peace summit. It wasn't about compromise. It was about rebuilding the galaxy on humanity's terms, and Hawksworth was making that very clear. One by one, the remaining leaders spoke, acknowledging the reality of the situation. They had no choice but to agree to humanity's terms, for no other force in the galaxy was capable of standing against them now. The war had been won, but the true battle was only just beginning. The question of peace was no longer in the hands of the galaxy. It was in humanity's hands. The weight of leadership felt heavier now than it ever had before. General Sarah Hawksworth stood at the edge of the command deck on the Vengeance, watching the vastness of space unfold before her. The galaxy stretched out like an endless sea, a frontier of stars that now seemed to belong to humanity alone. The summit had been a turning point, an uneasy, strained victory, but a victory nonetheless. The remaining factions had agreed to humanity's terms, but they weren't happy about it. The Xanthari, the former peacekeepers, were the most vocal in their discomfort. Chen had reluctantly accepted humanity's lead, but it was clear that the ancient species had a deep mistrust of the new order Hawksworth was forging. The Zephorii had swallowed their pride and joined the terms, but their war-hardened nature made them unpredictable allies. The Kvants were still reeling from their defeat, unsure of what their role would be in this new galaxy. And there was another problem, one that had lingered in the back of Hawksworth's mind since the war ended. As humanity took its place as the dominant power in the galaxy, what would that mean for the rest of the species? Would they accept the new order? Or would they always resent humanity for pushing them to the brink? "General," a voice interrupted her thoughts. It was Harrow, her ever-dedicated lieutenant, approaching with a solemn expression. "What is it, Harrow?" Hawksworth asked, not turning from the view. "We've received a report from the outer colonies. The settlements are growing restless. The peace treaties are in place, but there are whispers of rebellion. Some factions are questioning humanity's right to rule." Hawksworth sighed, finally turning to face him. "I knew it wouldn't be simple. This galaxy has been ruled by constant strife for millennia. A sudden shift in power, especially as radical as humanity's rise, will always breed resistance. We didn't win this war just to have the same old cycle of chaos start again. We need stability." "I understand, General," Harrow said, pausing as if considering his next words carefully. "But stability can't be forced. Not all species see things the way we do. Some may never accept humanity's leadership." "That's not an option," Hawksworth replied, her voice hardening. "We've fought for our place, and we'll do whatever it takes to maintain it." On the planet Kresh, in a far-flung system, the first signs of insurrection began. While the vast majority of the galaxy had surrendered to humanity's new authority, there were whispers among the Zephorii remnants. They had never been a species built for war, yet their pride had been deeply wounded. Some of their leaders, having seen their fleets reduced to nothing, were not willing to accept their defeat quietly. In the back alleys of Kresh's largest city, a group of dissidents began organizing. They called themselves the Resurgence. Their leader, a former Zephorii admiral, known only as Korath, was rallying supporters who felt that humanity's rise to power had come at too high a cost. "We've been crushed," Korath's voice echoed in darkened chambers, a hologram of him projected over a crowded room. "We've been made into slaves to a human empire. But we are Zephorii. We are not born to bow our heads. We will rise again, and we will make them pay for what they've done to us." As the words sank in, a murmur of agreement rose among the crowd. For many of the Zephorii, the loss of their fleets, their autonomy, and their place in the galaxy had been a deep blow to their honor. They refused to live under the shadow of humanity's power, especially when they still had the resources to fight. The resurgence wasn't just a rebellion, it was a symbol of defiance. If humanity could be defeated in the trenches of war, then perhaps they could be driven back politically. Or even more dangerously, militarily. Back aboard the Vengeance, Hawksworth sat in her command chair, reviewing reports. She was deep in thought when the communications officer's voice interrupted. "General, we have an encrypted transmission from the Zephorii system. It's not from Chen." The officer's voice shook slightly, a rare crack in his usual professionalism. Hawksworth's stomach tightened. She knew what it meant. "Patch it through," she ordered, leaning forward. The screen flickered, and the face that appeared was not one of diplomacy. Karath, the leader of the resurgence, stared back at her, his expression hard and filled with a quiet rage. "General Hawksworth," he said, his voice low but full of venom. "You think you've won. You think your victory is secure. But know this, the Zephorii will never bow to your empire. We will never serve a human king." Hawksworth's eyes narrowed. This wasn't a message of surrender or negotiation. This was a declaration of war. "You've got two choices, Karath," she said, her voice cold, the weight of authority behind every word. "You can lay down your arms and join the peace, or you can continue down this path of senseless violence. But make no mistake, we will destroy you." Karatha's lips curled into a smile. "Then come and try." The transmission cut off, and Hawksworth stood up, her face hardening with determination. "Prepare the fleet. I want every ship at the ready. We are going to crash." The Vengeance and its fleet moved swiftly through space, heading toward the rebellious Zephorii world. In the span of a few hours, the situation had gone from fragile peace to full-scale rebellion. Hawksworth had known that there would be resistance, but she had hoped for something more peaceful. Now, she had no choice but to put down this insurrection before it spread. As the ships approached Kresh, the first waves of resurgence forces appeared. Smaller, quicker Zephorii ships, operating with desperation and rage, launched from hidden bases scattered across the planet's orbit. "Target their ships first," Hawksworth ordered. "Take out their communications and their fleet. The planet comes last." The battle unfolded with the cold efficiency that humanity had come to expect from their war machines. The Vengeance and its allied ships tore through the Zephorii rebel fleet with brutal precision. Yet for all their power, the humans knew that a rebellion of this scale couldn't be crushed with just firepower. It would take more than that. It would take a message. As the rebels' last fleet collapsed, Hawksworth gave the final order: "Prepare for a ground assault. We will finish this on the surface. Karath will not escape." The ground forces deployed on Kresh, where the resurgence fighters had entrenched themselves within the city. But as Hawksworth's forces advanced, they found something unexpected. A civilian population caught in the crossfire, unwilling participants in a war they didn't choose. Hawksworth paused. This wasn't just a military operation. It was a reminder of the stakes of power. "If we destroy them all, we're no better than the Alliance ever was," she muttered under her breath. "We must bring them to the table, before it's too late." The ground was muddy and churned beneath the boots of General Sarah Hawksworth's forces as they advanced through the streets of Kresh's capital. The rebellion had grown beyond what anyone had expected. What had started as a small resistance movement was now a full-scale insurgency, entrenched in the civilian centers. Humanity's war machines had torn through the Zephorii rebel fleets with overwhelming power, but the true battle was now on the surface. Hawksworth's mind raced as she considered her next move. The resurgence was dangerous, yes, but there was something more troubling about the situation. The civilians. Kresh's population had been caught in the middle of a war they didn't ask for, and as her forces pushed deeper into the heart of the city, it was clear that they had no loyalty to either side. They were terrified, confused, and desperate. "General," came Harrow's voice over the comms, cutting through her thoughts. "We've located Karatha's main command center. It's under heavy guard, but it's not far. What's the plan?" Hawksworth glanced at the image of the command center displayed on the holographic map in front of her. Karath had taken refuge there, hidden beneath the ruins of Kresh's once proud government district. It was an isolated fortress, surrounded by narrow streets and fortified buildings. His forces were dug in deep, with weapons aimed at any incoming human assault. Her first instinct was to send in a full-on assault, break through the lines, and capture Korath. But the presence of civilians, trapped in the middle of the fighting, made that far more complicated. If humanity's victory was to have any meaning, it could not be one built on the backs of innocent lives. "Hold your positions," she commanded. "No assault until I've had a chance to speak with Korath." A ripple of surprise ran through the ranks of her officers, but no one questioned the order. Hawksworth had been their leader through the most brutal parts of the war. If she said there was a way to avoid more bloodshed, they would trust her judgment. In a small war-torn building near the city's heart, Hawksworth stood before a crude communication array. The hologram of Korath flickered to life in front of her, his expression grim and defiant, yet weary. The rebel leader stood surrounded by his inner circle, the remnants of the resurgence leadership, but this time there was no grandiose speech. There was only an air of desperation. "You wanted a direct line," Korath said, his voice rough. "Now you have it, General. I'm not giving up." Hawksworth stood firm, her voice calm but resolute. "You're a fool, Korath. You're fighting a losing battle, and you know it. You're not going to win this. The Zephorii won't recover from this war. You're all but finished." Korath scoffed. "You think I don't know that? But my people will never kneel to you, General. We won't be subjects of humanity. We've been humbled, broken. I won't let that happen without a fight." Hawksworth met his defiant gaze without flinching. "I'm not asking you to bow, Korath. But I will not let this war continue, not when innocents are being caught in the crossfire." A tense silence hung between them. Korath's anger flared, but there was also something in his eyes, something close to regret. "You want me to surrender," he said. "But what of my people? What do I tell them? What do I say to the survivors?" "You don't have to surrender, Korath," Hawksworth replied. "You can join us. The resurgence can put down its weapons. Help us rebuild. Help us guide your people toward a future where they don't have to fight just to survive. But if you keep this war going, if you force more of your people to die for a lost cause, then I will have no choice but to destroy you. Do you understand?" Korath's expression hardened, but for a brief moment, the fire in his eyes dimmed. He was fighting for something that wasn't just pride, it was the survival of his people. And in that moment, something shifted. "You may have won this war, General," Korath said, his voice quieter now. "But we're not the only ones who have lost. There are others who won't accept humanity's rule. And I will not be the last to rise up." Hawksworth sighed. "I don't want to destroy you, Korath. But if you force my hand, I will." Korath's hologram flickered for a moment, and Hawksworth saw him make a decision. He lowered his head. "I will speak to my people. But you have to understand this, General. The galaxy may have changed, but there are forces at play out there that we don't yet understand. You may have won the war, but you haven't won the galaxy." The transmission cut off. Hawksworth stood in the command center, her hands clenched at her sides. The conversation had ended in a way she hadn't expected. Korath had agreed to speak with his people and stop the fighting, but there was no guarantee he would succeed in convincing them. The seeds of rebellion were still planted in the hearts of many. "Prepare the fleet," she said after a moment. "We may not have Korath's full surrender, but we're going to offer him an ultimatum. Join us, or we'll wipe out the resurgence completely. No mercy." She knew the consequences. The rebellion was more than just Korath's bitterness. It was a sign of something deeper, something that couldn't be solved by force alone. Humanity had won the war, but peace would be much harder to secure. The galaxy was fractured, and that fracture would not heal with simple diplomacy. "General, there's more," Harrow said, his voice tense. "We've received reports of unrest spreading beyond Kresh. Small cells of resistance are popping up on other Zephorii colonies. There's talk of a wider rebellion." "Damn it," Hawksworth muttered under her breath. "This isn't over. Not by a long shot." As the days passed, the human fleet remained in orbit around Kresh, awaiting Korath's response. Hawksworth spent her time organizing the rebuilding process on the planet's surface. The remnants of the Zephorii were broken, their cities scarred by war, but there was still hope. They had the resources, the technology, and the leadership to rebuild, if they would accept it. The future of the galaxy was still uncertain. Humanity had won the war, but in doing so, they had inherited a fractured, unstable universe. It would take more than military might to bring lasting peace. It would take unity, compromise, and the willingness to rebuild, not just the physical structures of the galaxy, but the trust between its peoples. Karatha's rebellion had sparked a fire that would not easily be extinguished. But perhaps, in time, that fire could be turned into something new, a force for change, for growth, for a galaxy that no longer had to be ruled by war.